everybody. I am attorney Michael Ehline, and as you know, I am an attorney licensed in Texas and California. I do primarily civil rights and personal injury law, car accidents, truck accidents, and stuff like that. But I have a lot of friends who have asked me to come on and do these shows. I sort of stood in for Chili DeCastro when he was locked away, and I've sort of developed a following. I'm here early tonight to try to get the show kicked off. So what I'll do is I'll go through my regular deal. Everything that I do here is separate and apart from the work that I do as a lawyer, unless it's, an activist type thing where I'm pushing for some kind of legislation. And I'm a legal historian, and I became a lawyer on the law study program. So I studied under lawyers and judges and tried cases as a certified law student, as well as doing depositions and things like that. Learn the law that way, the traditional way. And I'm an honorably discharged Marine. I'm disabled from the Corps, and I'm a patriot, and I love my country. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about Kyle Seraphin, and he's an FBI whistleblower. And a lot of you guys may not know this, but I represent whistleblowers. And a whistleblower is somebody who works for typically an administrative agency, and they speak out against the management or some kind of policy that goes against the Constitution or violates people's rights. And as a result of that, they'll get harassed and they'll be constructively or actually terminated. Hopefully you guys are understanding this so far. Hi, everybody in the sidebar. I just want to kind of just give you a little explanation of what a whistleblower is. And, Eric Snowden was an example of a whistleblower. Some people say that, he violated the law and therefore he's a traitor. But what he was trying to do is expose illegal surveillance programs that the government has imposed upon the American people, basically at a rate that we've never seen before. And it really started under Bush and then went high speed under Obama. Obama was a big time administrative stater, packed all the administrative agencies with hardcore leftists and got them into leadership positions. Mainly people from academia, his old friends from the academics, right? The hardcore leftists, the woke. And we've seen that progression with the administrative agencies now becoming hardcore left. And so we're going to do a little bit of timeline and show you how corruptible administrative agencies are, and, how it went from targeting Martin Luther King, right, under Hoover, and now to targeting white people and Christians under the new administrative left, under the leftists. So before it was targeting leftists, and now leftists run it, and they target traditional Americans who believe in natural law, people who go to church, people who believe in the Second Amendment, people who want legal immigration. So we're going to get into that in 1 second, but I'm just going to go ahead and kick off my show really quick to another edition of Ask Michael Ehline. This is where I teach people the law in an unorthodox manner by using examples that we see in the news, case law briefs, but it's all about exposing the Leviathan and its instrumentalities and taking back your rights. Know the law and mean to keep it well. Come here to learn from an expert to know your right. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. So just really quick before I get into the meat of the show, thanks again, everybody, for showing up. As you know, it takes a little while for the people to start pulling into the stream, but I just want to say hi to Tiniablas, Abysmos, and Jeff Hates Pigs. Good seeing you. Ghost Man, love seeing you. Katie Frizzle for Shizzle, thanks for joining me tonight. Bo Ghibli, I agree, Bush was a joke. I think the whole Bush family, what a disgrace. Just big time globalists, just kind of, look, we've had a uniparty system forever. It's just now it's more pronounced, but they've always been globalists either way. Council on Foreign Relations, now they have WEF. There's always some weird kind of like Dr. Evil character trying to, depopulate the planet and, get with little kids. It's always the same thing. It's weird, man. And then, look, there's plenty of blame to go around Montana Kid. He's saying Reagan took away the A2. I think you're talking about the Second Amendment, I think. But Yeah, I mean, there's always a progression in the administrative state to want to disarm law-abiding citizens, of course. I mean, if you're a tyrant, you certainly don't want the population to have any means to resist you. It's just normal. That's right out of the Pol Pot Mao Zedong Little Red Book that they seem to worship at college campuses nowadays, like Harvard, right? So, really quick, I just want to play this video for you so you can learn a little bit about who Kyle is. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Hoover, because I sort of look at Hoover as the sort of the father of the modern day administrative state model. You blackmail all the politicians, you get dirt on them so you can stay in power and basically create your own shadow government where you're really in control. And that's what a lot of people believe has really happened over the years. And that's why many people believe we need to abolish the administrative state and start over from scratch. And let's just go ahead and watch this video really quick. It's actually just a little slideshow, but you'll get the idea. Check it out. Yeah, so they're pushing this false narrative that there's some kind of like right-wing, white supremacist movement. This is their new thing. They're trying to say Catholics are part of that. Totally insane. Anything that's like pro-traditional family values, anything that supports like normal families, it's homophobic and bigoted according to this new generation of woke. So this guy stood against it. It's like you're targeting religious groups. You're targeting religious groups. So there you go. So that's kind of what that's all about. And let me just get rid of this. Get rid of this one. Get over here to Hoover. All right. So I don't know if you guys heard everything, but basically what's been happening, and we're going to get into it into more of it, but since about March 5th, I've been on notice that the FBI had an illegal spy operation targeting Christians, gun owners, people who purchase Bibles, people who shop at Dick's and Cabela's. They have a public-private partnership where they're stealing your bank data using a private corporation to do that, and then they're running programs on it to see if you're somebody who might have bought a gun or somebody who believes in Jesus, for example. And if you are, you're deemed by the modern administrative state to be a potential domestic violent extremist. It's not a joke. And I'll show you the actual documents and the congressional findings. But this guy is part of that whistleblower group. There were several FBI agents. So here's what's happened. Basically, since Obama, all of the FBI employees have gone from like traditional family value type people to like the trans LGBTQ thing. The whole culture is totally flipped. And so the holdovers, like the traditional, like Christians, people with the military background, veterans, they're sort of getting run out. This is what I'm hearing. Okay. I can't prove it yet, personally, but other lawyers have proven it in court. And so you see this sea change, and that's the problem. People can blame the Democrats, people can blame the Republicans, whoever's in power, they're going to change those agencies to make them serve the interests of the political elite. That's how it always has been. And we're going to get into that. But it's really a creation of the administrative state. Anytime you give a bureaucrat some power, they're going to find a way to fleece the taxpayer and get more power. And those administrators have enormous amounts of sway with big business and corporations. They could, a building inspector can hold up your project indefinitely and put millions of dollars of investments on the line. Just to give you an example of how an administrator wields an enormous amount of power. Imagine being an FBI dude, how much power you'd have. Hey, good seeing you, Wanda Mise. All right, so we're going to get into this really quick. I want you guys to listen. This is going to be probably a little bit longer show than I normally do, but I think this is a really good documentary show for me to leave behind for my kids, because I want them to see why is it, Dad, that one of us always gets pulled out of line at the airport and gets a secondary search whenever we travel with you, Dad? Why is that, Dad? Well, you're going to learn why, and you're going to learn why probably your wife or your kid, if you travel and you're somebody who posts in favor of what people consider to be, I guess, traditional family values. If you support, things like if you quote Psalms and Proverbs, for example, on social media, that could be enough to have you targeted as a potential domestic violent extremist. We'll get into that in a minute. I know some of you are laughing if you think that these agencies are like godly or whatever, but let's hear about who I believe is the founder of the modern day FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. And he had a 50-year career of blackmail, entrapment, and taking down, I guess, communist spies. I mean, that's the only thing that I really liked about him, is that he went after communists. But ultimately, the problem is when you are in a position of that much power, anybody could be a communist. See, that's the problem. That's why, although I like Bukele down in El Salvador, I'm really guarded about it. He's locked up all those gang members because he has so much power now. He could lock up all of his political opponents. So there's this pendulum, and to have an honorable leader, it's so difficult. And even with our constitutional republic, we've seen that it was easily corrupted by Marxists and influence from communist China by paying off our, college professors and changing our curriculum to become anti-American, right? Like, kids don't even know who they are anymore. They have no identity, no national identity. And that's all just being done with money. So even the republic can be corrupted. But let's go ahead and listen to this a quick little portion of this. It's a podcast, but it's really good. And I want you guys to keep your ears on for me.
Scott here with another episode of the History Unplugged podcast. The most powerful non-elected person in modern American history is arguably J. Edgar Hoover, who led the FBI for 48 years. Today, he's remembered as a paranoid, secretive power monger who kept files on everyone and would blackmail them if necessary, and also for his purported tendency to cross-dress. But he was much more than a one-dimensional tyrant and schemer who strong-armed the rest of the country into submission. As FBI director from 1924 to his death in 1972, he was a confidant, counselor, and adversary to 8 U.S. presidents. He became director of the FBI as a wide-eyed wonderkind, full of optimism and progressive ideas about using the state to transform society in a good way. He had many early career successes, taking down bank robbers like John Dillinger, and later rooting out communist spies like the Rosenbergs. In the 1950s, millions of Americans admired him, and his approval rating reached.
Just so you guys know, I mean, the Rosenbergs were really evil communist spies. And we know from the Venona project that was done by Harvard that McCarthy, he had access to the transcripts. So he knew that all the people that he brought before him, and he asked them, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? They were communists. And they were, and all communists are, dedicated to the destruction of the constitutional republic. The only reason why communism is allowed is because the ACLU was able to get their judges on the high court to basically allow it, even though it's dedicated to the destruction of the constitutional republic. Remember, communism is based on theft. It's based on forced redistribution. So if you're a successful person and you're gifted, for example, that's considered to be like a bad thing, sort of like wokeism. It's the same thing. A merit-based promotion is bad. It's probably racist because merit is racist. But it's really just a repackaged form of communism, just so you guys understand. Let's get back into it.
Reached as high as 98%. But to start well, when it was discovered, he launched the COINTEL program, a series of covert and illegal projects to infiltrate domestic American political organizations, including anti-Vietnam war organizers, civil rights groups, and many others. To talk about Hoover's complicated legacy is today's guest, Beverly Gage, author of G-Man, J. Edgar Hoover and the Making of the American Century. We look at why he was so successful, why he was felled by his own hubris, and the reason Hoover was so powerful is because he reflected the ideals of many people in the administrative state. Hope you enjoyed this discussion with Beverly Gage.
He's awesome.
I'd like to start off with an episode at the end of Hoover's career that sounds very strange in 2022, but it speaks to the half century of goodwill that he built up as the FBI director. In 1964, he denounced Martin Luther King Jr. as, quote, the the country's most notorious liar, unquote. And what's interesting is that 50% of Americans supported him over the 16% that supported MLK. Why was he so popular at the time? And because this stat sounds strange to us today, what does it say about the change in attitudes toward Hoover and the FBI in the last 50 years?
I think one of the most surprising things about the book, and for me, one of the most surprising things in researching Hoover, is, as you suggest, that he was really popular for most of his career. And that poll captured for me some of the paradoxes of American history and just how much has changed since that moment in 1964. So I think in our world, Hoover is one of the greatest villains of the 20th century. And of course,
Thanks,
Martin
Brett.
Luther King is one
time.
of our greatest heroes. But if you look back into this moment in history, you can see that actually the story was a lot more complicated. So Hoover, by 1964, had already been FBI director for 40 years. And a huge part of his career as director was in building up the reputation of the FBI and therefore building up his own reputation. And that happened in a couple of different ways. He had an enormous PR wing that was there basically to advertise the FBI, to write fake columns for him that he himself did not write. He was very strategic about reaching out to popular constituencies that he thought would support him. So organizations.
Okay, so hopefully, look, this video, by the way, is really terrific. And I'll leave the link. In fact, I'm going to put the link. I want all you guys to understand, because this dude is like the model for the administrative state. I mean, guy stayed in power for like 50 years. He was able to basically, he had his own propaganda wing to try to hold on to power and create more power for his agency. And that's why I just detest all administrative agencies as a necessary evil that should be bound by the chains of the Constitution and should have absolute amazing civilian oversight, not political oversight, because those politicians, look, they work in tandem, right? With the prison industrial complex, for example. So if you're building a private prison, who do you want to be friends with? Well, probably the director of the FBI, or if you're in the state government, probably a lot of the directors of the police departments, the chiefs, the sheriffs, the judges who lock people away. You want to have people like that as friends. We recently just did a video about those 2 judges. I think they locked away over 1,400 young kids illegally into juvenile hall. And they were getting kickbacks from these private prisons. And it just happens all the time. So the administrative state is basically evil in its nature because it appeals to the greed of the person who's never actually had to have a real job, right? You're talking about an administrator, a bureaucrat, someone who probably spent their life on a college campus until they got a job in government, where all you guys in my sidebar are primarily out working really hard, trying to figure out a way to support your family. And God forbid you go to church on Sunday, because now these same guys are going to be targeting you as a potential domestic violent extremist. And this is based on facts. These are not lies. This is from a congressional report that shows you specifically what the FBI is doing. What's sad is because so many FBI and CIA and government employees work back and forth with Google and Facebook. They basically work hand in hand with the bureaucracy and right now with the present administration. Before it was heavily with Obama, but they all work hand in hand. They're all buddies, and they work to suppress true information and to promote fake information. And then they call your information fake news. And that's why Americans are really, really upset about what's going on, because most of us who are capable of critical thinking don't buy this. And that's why many are saying they're trying to flood us with like peasants from third world countries and just immediately get them on welfare, because they're not going to be critical thinkers. They're going to be people who receive a welfare check and don't really pursue a real education. They'll go to like one of our modern colleges, right? But that, you get a degree in what? African-American studies, gay rights studies. You're not going to get a job in the regular workforce. And those are the types of degrees a lot of the kids are getting. Those will qualify you for a job at Starbucks. So those are the kind of people that they want to have in our country. They don't want critical thinkers. And so now what I want to do is lay a further foundation before we introduce Kyle to you from one of my older videos where I completely explain what just happened. And illegally spying on us, lied before Congress and denied that we were being spied on with our cell phone data. Like, they take all of our cell phone data and they store it, and then they can play it back and listen to it. They use this data mining to see if you've used any keywords that might go against the that might go against the United States government. And then they'll try to target you, like when you're at the airport or pretty much wherever you go. They'll try to find ways to use this new social credit scoring system that Justin Trudeau rolled out against his truckers and was just struck down by his high court. But it's basically was developed in partnership with Google and Communist China as a system to basically take away your access to be able to travel or have access to your money unless you sing the party line, unless you go along with what with what the government says. And so it's a real problem. And this is part of that program, this data mining, so they can characterize you and develop your credit score. So if you support the Second Amendment, if you were a military veteran, your social credit score is probably like a C- already just because of that. But if you go to church, it's probably an F-, right? If you're a Catholic, it's probably like off the charts F. And we're going to get into that in a minute, what they're doing.
Oh, you don't have any papers?
All right. You hear us? Okay, you got me? Yeah. All right. Well, never let it be said that I gave up on my, I guess I'll call you my quasi-Marines, because we have a saying in the Marine Corps, we're only as fast as our slowest man. So I stayed with you guys to get you through it. All right. And hopefully nobody got pulled over and asked for their papers today. So I want you to watch Kyle. All right, guys, this is really important to me. This is going to be a long video and I'm going to break it up. So I appreciate it if you guys can hang out with me. And by the way, I gear my shows towards the people who travel or who work at a computer, because you can listen to my videos all day and learn cool stuff, because I try to teach things that you don't learn about on the news. Now, Kyle Seraphin is a really interesting guy. As you saw earlier, he's a former FBI agent. He was sent out basically to try and target white people and try to find evidence of white supremacy, and basically told to ignore BLM as they were burning down cities. So we know that the FBI is highly politicized, and most people say that it really started under Obama. And I would say that's probably true based upon the whistleblower cases that I've worked on. The new generation of wokesters don't believe in rule of law. They believe in winning at all costs. They don't believe in natural law. They don't believe that you have unalienable rights. They believe that a politician should have the right to control your thoughts. That is precisely what wokeism is. It's a repackaged form of communism. That's all it is. And so let's see if we can get this shared, and let's take a look at and listen to what Kyle has to say.
Every day. And I imagine, having been in the belly of the beast, so to speak, it gives you an enormous perspective on what we're seeing right now. And I wanted to have you on the show for a while to talk about the corruption at the FBI, your crusade to stop it. And we'll get to that in a minute. But over the past few days, we've actually gotten some breaking news that I want to get your context on first before we get more into your story and your history from the TSA, placing innocent Americans on a terror watch list, and the federal air marshals sitting quietly nearby on flights because these Americans who were in Washington, D.C. or near Washington, D.C. on January 6th are the gravest threat to America and therefore need to be placed on terror watch lists. The inability to travel freely, which is a constitutional right, and
like that,
federal air marshals sitting by watching their every movement. What do we know about this story?
It's rare you run into a journalist who understands the constitutional right of travel. So give me a bunch of ones for this guy. By the way, this is the channel is called Redacted. I've seen a couple of his shows, and he's pretty legit. He sounds like he's right on the money.
This sounds like an absolute outrage, and I think most Americans have no idea that this is actually happening. What do we know about this?
So basically, we know all of this stuff because of a group of people that are a private organization that represent, in sort of like a legal way, the Federal Air Marshal Service. This is known as the FAMS inside the law enforcement community.
Mhm.
And one in particular, a woman named Sonia Labasco, has come forward and kind of been their figurehead. The group is called the Air Marshals National Council. It's like an advocacy group, or like, it's not quite a union, but something to that effect. And they have been trying to dig into what happened to their agency. They obviously have been around for a very long time. They got a big juice, kind of a steroidal boost that happened after 9/11 to follow potential hijackers and protect the American airways. And since the January 6th, riot that happened at the Capitol in Washington, D.C., their mission has shifted dramatically to the point where they're not doing the mission that they had done for the last 20 years.
That's right.
They are no longer following international potential terrorists. They're following around American citizens who just happen to be on flight manifests flying into the national capital region, like between January 4th and January 7th of 2021. Now, it doesn't seem like a very good use of federal resources. These are highly trained federal agents that work in a linear.
So a lot of people don't understand that, like January 6th, that the whole thing was basically orchestrated. That, that people were ushered into the Capitol. Capitol Police were working with the politicians to try to make this thing much worse than it should have been. And we know that a lot of people aren't being prosecuted and are probably agents who worked for them. And we know from the Twitter files and from more recent information, like the January 6th committee, for example, wasn't even legally authorized under the House rules. They put two partisan Republicans who basically hate Trump on that committee, and they disallowed any exculpatory evidence. They disallowed any evidence at all that would point towards exculpation or innocence of the president in this case, who his last tweet was for everyone to remain calm and be safe. And of course, all of his social media accounts were shut down, and that tweet was deleted. And now we know that these FBI agents were going back and forth from Twitter, Facebook, and they all have these revolving door jobs, and they're all like hardcore, like Obama supporters and, Bill Gates supporters. And it's all just like this big politically charged, like basically like Facebook and Google are just basically another branch of the FBI. That's what we learned as a result of the Twitter files. So let's get into a little bit more and hear what Kyle has to say. He's an actual FBI agent and what happened to him for going against the woke agenda at the FBI.
Your combat environment, that's what a plane is. That's what a bus or a train is. And there's not a lot of people that train specifically for that mission set to be able to take back a plane. That's why you have federal air marshals. And so now they're just sitting around doing surveillance missions on Americans with no allegations that they've been involved in a crime. And that's really wild. And so many people, I think, probably have that same instinct, like, what in the hell happened to this country that we suddenly knew right after, days after January 6th, that everybody there was a domestic terrorist and a white supremacist? Where did that narrative come from? Who was crafting it? Who was pushing out those talking points? A lot of the leftist media has kind of
it was Valerie Jarrett and all of the Harvard, Columbia University leftists, the people who the serial plagiarizer crew, right? The people who plagiarize and then they get appointed into the bureaucracy, not because they're qualified, but because they have a different skin color or they meet some other far left radical qualification. And these are the people who have been placed in charge of all of our administrative agencies, according to many.
Board right away. And what we found out is that through FOIA requests and a lot of sort of investigation by this Air Marshals National Council, they got one of the original letters that was sent from Benny Thompson, who was the chairman of the House Committee on Home.
This dude is a hardcore, like if he had white skin and you replaced the things that he says about white people with the word black person, he would be immediately attacked and destroyed as a racist. But because he can hide behind being a different color, he can attack white people with impunity.
Homeland Security. And he wrote a letter to the administrator of the TSA. So that administrator doesn't sound like it's a very prestigious title, but that's the top guy at TSA. His name is David Pekoski. And Pekoski got a letter that basically said the following: what are you doing to address these white supremacists and domestic terrorists that tried to take over our government and may try to come after and attack the inauguration of Joe Biden? And what are those steps that you're taking to inhibit their...
Now, by the way, I'm hoping that I have enough critical thinkers in the audience to understand how our government works. Okay. going to Washington, D.C., a few thousand drunk morons who caused damage, and many of them were Antifa undercover, as well as, now we know, probably half of the crowd were government agents, right? That it's unbelievable how many government agents were there. And we're going to get into that in a future episode. But it was almost, it's just uncanny, unbelievable. How many of you guys think that someone going in and taking over the Capitol building will take over the government and overthrow the government? Is there anybody here who's unplugged enough from social media and CNN and PMS, NBC to understand that someone going in and occupying a few government buildings will have absolutely zero effect on taking over the government? An example, Operation Valkyrie under Hitler, when there was a counter-revolution to try to get him out of power. Sure, they needed to take Berlin, but it wasn't because of the government buildings themselves. It was because that's where all of the officers and the reactionary police force was. So they needed to get there, and they needed to get false information to say the Fuhrer is dead and we're now taking over. So that's how you take over a government. You don't just go in and take over a few buildings. So the narrative from CNN and all these academics, and you're going to hear at the public schools and colleges, is a joke. There was never any real serious effort or attempt to overthrow the U.S. government. It's total bullshit. Anybody who thinks that really needs to get their head examined. Let's keep listening.
Ability to get on an aircraft. That's what he asked them. That, to me, when you're the oversight committee that has the the purse strings for a federal agency, you're essentially saying you've got 1 week to come up with a briefing telling me what your solution is to this problem. And we haven't seen that until just this week, which is pretty wild. The second piece of it is it was written 5 days after. It was written on January 11th. So this happened very, very quickly, that with no trials, with no completed investigations, he had already decided that they were white supremacists and that they were domestic terrorists. And many of these people were never charged with anything at all. Some of them have not been convicted and they are still pending.
Yep.
But it turns out that that's a real problem for me as someone who swore allegiance to the Constitution.
Amen.
And theoretically, a congressman would have as well. We do have a Fifth Amendment right to due process. And in theory, we shouldn't be taking away your constitutional guaranteed right to travel. I did a whole piece on this for Uncover DC. Tracy Beans does a pretty good website over there. And they carried my piece, which basically said that since like 1870, the United States Supreme Court has confirmed that the right to travel is actually constitutional.
Right. So all you Chile de Castro guys and all you like the sovereigns and all these other guys, I really want you to consider checking out Kyle's. He's got his own channel. I think he's really heavy at Rumble. I don't think YouTube likes him very much. But this guy really has some good stuff, and he really knows about the right to travel. And I would say he's probably more along my lines. I know he's a former vet. I think he's a combat vet, which definitely makes me have a lot of respect for him. Anybody willing to lay down their life for their country is a special kind of person, in my opinion. But I don't see him as being really political. I don't think he became even remotely political until he was targeted at his own agency by all these wokesters that have basically taken over the FBI's leadership. Let's go ahead and keep listening to him. I really like the guy. I want you to keep checking him out.
To be able to move between states. So if you're going to deprive somebody of that right without any due process, that should be a problem, one would think, and especially if you have a constitutional oath to protect the Bill of Rights.
What additional security screenings are these people going through? Are they being alerted that they're now on some special list? They're being watched, that over their shoulder there's a federal air marshal as they get up to go to the bathroom or ask for additional peanuts, that there's a federal air marshal there making sure that they are not a threat to national security?
Yeah, it's a kind of a yes and a no.
Yeah.
If you're in the know, then you know what's going on. If you've experienced it, the people that have experienced it definitely know that something is amiss. When they print out their boarding pass, when you and I go jump on a flight, especially if you're going domestically in the U.S., you can usually check in 24 hours in advance. You go to United.
Pay close attention. Every time I travel, this happens to one of my kids. I get targeted every time. And you guys know why. It's because I speak out against this leftist nonsense. And so I am on this list. And I know of several other people who are on this list. And you can find out. It's so crazy. Just listen to what this guy has to say. You can actually tell by looking at your ticket that you're one of these people being targeted. And, obviously, there's a whole long story behind this with me and my traveling. But I travel to El Salvador all the time. And I love the people down there. And I'm considering even moving my family down there. And we are harassed by security over, like with the secondary S and, dig through all my kids' stuff. And I know several other patriots, veterans, people who shop at, Cabela's or might buy a Bible. And it's all the same, always happening to them. Keep on watching.
You go to Southwest, whatever, and you say, yeah, click in and put me in the boarding group and I'm good to go. These people will find that there's an error in trying to check in. They're unable to do that. And they'll have to actually go to the flight desk. They'll have to go to the desk outside the secured area at any airport they want to travel in. And when they do, they're going to see wide eyes from the attendant who's standing behind the desk.
And they'll try and push you for that optical scan and make you think that it's the law that you have to do it. This is Big Brother on steroids, guys. They're flying people from El Salvador without checking them. They don't have any idea who they are. They're just trying to flood our country with illegal aliens at your expense. But American citizens, people who support the Constitution like me, are absolutely being targeted by airport personnel. They're doing anything they can to ID you, watch you, and harass you. Now keep on watching.
Because it's going to alert them that this person is on a terror watch list called Quiet Skies.
Quiet Skies.
Now, Quiet Skies, people may be familiar with because it was a big expose that the Boston Globe did in 2018. Yeah. And it was such a big blowback on the department, on the TSA, that they ended up putting out on their website. You can actually go find it right now. Just type in Quiet Skies TSA, and you'll see they have an official statement about what it is. And in theory, it's watching potential terrorists based on all these types of metrics they do and the intel analysts.
If they're worried about terrorists, why do we have a wide open southern border? Why are they allowing illegal aliens to jump on airplanes without a passport and flying them into military bases and letting them free at tax expense with a free cell phone? Think about that, how ridiculous this sounds. I mean, this guy is right on the money.
Let's crunch all the numbers, and they decide who the potential threats are that are international terrorists. But in reality, what it's become since January of 2021 is it's just a watch of American citizens that's no allegations of any violence or any danger. When they get flagged with this Quiet Skies program, they're going to see 4 S's prominently displayed in at least 2 places on their boarding pass. And that
Ta-da! Okay, guys, I've got my boarding passes. I'm going to dig them out and show them to you, just to prove that I'm not lying. Not right now, but I'll do it in a future show. Guys, they're going to change it. I already know because I do whistleblower work. They're going to change it to where it's less obvious, that so you can't know that you're being surveilled. But they're literally putting this on your freaking ticket. They're letting you know that you have been targeted as a potential domestic violent extremist. The video that I played earlier where I exposed that illegal spying program, where if you purchase a firearm at Dick's or Cabela's, or you purchase a Bible, you're automatically being placed on this list as a white supremacist or a domestic violent extremist. It's a fact. It's going on right now. And when you're traveling at the airports and you're getting secondaries, look at that ticket. You're going to see it, or look at your old tickets if you were harassed, because now you know why. On my website, michaelehline.com, I did an article about some of this illegal surveillance at airports and how you don't have to consent to these eye scans. As a civil libertarian, I feel it's my duty to educate everybody. We need to have a system for the new generation to have classical education. If you don't start homeschooling your kids, homesteading, and getting them away from these administrative leviathanic agencies, we will have Idiocracy 101. It will be real, and people will just go along with the program. Now, let's keep on listening to what this gentleman has to say. Hopefully, you guys understand why I'm playing this video now. We're getting targeted, guys. We're being harassed by the administrative state, and it's at full speed ahead ever since the Obama administration.
Odd S delineator is their first tip that they're about to have a really rough experience, sometimes lasting hours. They're going to get aggressive and enhanced screening procedures. They're going to be physically touched, sometimes even strip searched. Every single item that they bring with them is going to be swabbed for potential bomb-making activity. Yep. They're going to swab every zipper of every bag, of every carry-on. They'll open every pouch.
They do it to us on the way there and on the way back. And the security down in El Salvador is nasty. I mean, they have zero personality. It's almost like, the Death Star. It's a terrible thing. Let's keep on watching.
And they go through every single compartment, and they go through this incredibly aggressive theatrical display that has no benefit to the American people. Interestingly enough, I think the number that Sonia Labasco told me was something like $500 million has been spent on this program.
Yeah. So guys, I just want you to take a really quick look at me, right? Okay. I am a typical white male who grew up in the 80s, owned several firearms, have shot all my life. I teach a CQB class for female rape victims. So I can teach them how to survive a close quarter battle with someone and close quarter defense. And I've been in judo since I was 6 years old, martial arts, expert shooter, Marine, patriot, lawyer, and they're targeting me. But these Antifa dudes that are like hitting people over the head with padlocks and stuff, they're down in El Salvador right now, handing out free phones to these illegals and giving them maps showing them how to come up here. And that's being funded by your tax dollars through non-governmental organizations. When I'm down there, we follow these guys around and watch what they do. They try to find communists and poor people. That's the people they want, because they know as soon as they get up to the United States, they're going to be able to go on welfare. And ultimately, they're going to be able to change the voting districts with the census just by being here alone. And at some point, they're going to be able to vote like they're trying to do in all the Democrat states. So it's just a win-win-win for the non-governmental organizations in the administrative state. Why is that? Well, the prison industrial complex is at some point is going to fill up, because we know Venezuela basically emptied their prisons and sent them up here, according to many experts. And we can see that in their arrests for RAPE and attacking women. So we know it's happening pretty heavily. Let's get back into the video and learn a little bit more about how regular Americans are being targeted at the FBI for simply believing in the Constitution.
Since they created it, and it's got 0 terrorists have been interdicted with it. So it's completely theatrical. It's classic TSA, right?
Right.
So the sad thing is these guys are going to go through.
Are you going to interdict me at the airport? It's like I'm traveling. I got Bibles in my luggage. I got my laptop because I'm going to do a podcast when I'm hanging out at the hotel down there. You really think that I'm like a domestic extremist? The only thing extreme about me is it's extreme to the Luciferians and these radicals who have taken over the administrative state. That's the only thing extreme about me, is that I believe in freedom, and they don't want freedom. There's 2 kinds of people in this world: those who want to be controlled and those who don't. I don't want to be controlled. Give me a bunch of ones if you don't want to be controlled either.
That, or these guys and gals, they actually had a big breakover, and this is why I'm mentioning Uncover again. Uncover DC did this piece. A woman named Wendy Mahoney wrote a story about the fact that an infant was placed on this terror watch list, because the infant is the child of 2 people that are on the watch list.
That's right.
And so, like an 8-month-old.
So they do this to my kids every time we travel, and we have the S's on the thing. They do it every time. So it's a form of harassment, and it's just by the leftist Marxist state. It's their way of showing you that they have power. And if they had absolute power and they controlled the entire judiciary, we would be exactly like communist China. Make no mistake about it. This is a battle of life and death right now for your freedom, guys. Keep watching this. This is going to blow your mind.
Infant or 11-month-old infant being placed on there. It literally says infant on the boarding pass and then quad S's. People can see the photos over on the website. So this also should really outrage people, because there's an opportunity cost. You've got a bunch of federal air marshals, highly trained for a specific mission set, and now they're babysitting a family with an infant. Anyone who's ever traveled with an infant kind of knows how difficult and tough that is to do. You're not looking to do terrorism. You're looking to make sure your baby doesn't make everybody on the plane miserable. And now they've got like hours and hours of missing flights. Oftentimes there's like sort of this process is the punishment type of thing.
That's right.
It all comes apparently out of the Committee for Homeland Security.
Hear that? The process is the punishment. That's what they're doing, guys. Just like the January 6th prisoners, right? They're locking them in solitary, not letting them have access to their lawyers, doing anything they can to get a plea agreement, right? It's to force a plea agreement so the administrative state can say, look, they were guilty. We were right. They were wrong. They were guilty. That's what this is all about. Let's keep going.
Which is pretty awful to think.
Well, hopefully if they're going to spend all that time with the baby, they'd at least, change the diaper and take care of the baby for a while, because that's the biggest problem. It's unbelievable to me.
I don't know about you, but I don't want anybody who works for the administrative state anywhere near my children. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree.
And, most Americans have no idea that this is happening, and they are now the targets of this. America, patriotic Americans are now the target, the biggest threat to democracy internally. This is where we're now seeing.
And Frank Vuhlman just put up a really interesting comment. So I gotta share something with you. The local schools now, the public schools, are forcing the children to put their cell phones in a special bag that won't allow the signal so the phone allegedly, so it can't ring and distract the kids. But of course, the real reason is that the kids have been filming and tape recording the school teachers as they're trying to force this absurd, disgusting, sexual Marxist indoctrination on children. as they make anti-white and racist comments about white people, the school administrators are getting in trouble for that. And so the real reason, based on what I'm hearing from several school districts and people who I know who are whistleblowers, is that they're trying to force the kids to put these phones in a special bag that prevents the signal from emitting. So you can't use your phone, or you can't receive a signal either. So if you were trying to call your kid, look, bottom line is just another reason to get your kids out of public school. Nothing good's going to come out of it by leaving them there. They're brainwashing your kids to support the Marxist state. That's what I'm hearing from a lot of people. Let's keep on listening.
Seeing our intelligence community. We've heard it from Secretary Mayorkas of Department of Homeland Security emphatically state after on a 9/11 ceremony talking about the biggest threat to the United States is internal, a domestic white supremacist terrorism. Where have we seen this, though? Where is the evidence that the biggest threat to the United States?
There isn't any. It's complete bullshit. It's a joke. This is the Valerie Jarrett Obama narrative that everything is based on race and everything's identity politics, and we have to divide everyone. White people are oppressors and everyone else is the oppressed. White people need to give up everything that they have to pay back for the sins. It's just Marxism is all it is. These are academics, and unfortunately they were able to infiltrate social media, which controls the minds of the youth. Let's keep listening.
States, you worked at the FBI. Is there a mountain of evidence showing that the greatest threat to the United States is from inside?
Not in my personal experience. And let me step us back and kind of say, how did we get here? Because I think that's really the story.
Yep.
Is how did the FBI become an organization that is out there running after what we call statistical accomplishments and running numbers that are specifically geared on the threat that this Biden administration is interested in, the white supremacy. He said it multiple times. He's made political enemies his biggest priority based on what he said. I'm just taking the guy's own words. I'm not a real political guy. I never really was. So this is kind of a weird story, but let's walk it back to see how did this happen. And a friend of mine named George Hill, who's part of my little group of FBI whistleblowers, we've kind of banded together like on this lifeboat called the Suspendables so that we don't end up, getting squashed by this huge government agency that's, pretty dangerous and scary. And what we've done is we've done a bunch of interviews and I've kind of gleaned a lot. He was a former intel guy. He was at the FBI for 12 years. He was a supervisory intel analyst. Before that, he was at the NSA for 5 years. And he spent 26 years also in the background working for Marine Corps. He was working for Marine Corps intelligence and then also for naval intelligence. So the guy's got a very serious resume. And I asked him a simple question. And sometimes when you get that, you don't get a good answer. His answer was outstanding. And it's worth your audience understanding.
Guys, I want you to listen to this. This is the problem that Chile de Castro has with police, because they'll turn their head because they're waiting on their pension and they don't want to lose that job. And being a whistleblower is bad for your health. Ask Snowden, ask WikiLeaks. It's bad for your health to expose government corruption, guys.
Before 9/11, the United States had a very clear name and mission set for what national security involved. It involved protecting our constitutionally guaranteed way of life. And it made sure that the Constitution maintained its, supremacy as the document that governed the United States.
Yeah.
And nobody could take us over. That was the whole point. Now, people die in that mission, and they have. I know some, you may know some. People give their lives in order to serve that mission set for national security. And that was part of the goal. It was like, keep the fight away from the United States and protect this country.
Yep.
On basically September 12th of 2001, that mission changed dramatically. And we've seen that roll out over 20 years or so as it's metastasized to a very different mission. And that mission was as follows. No American will die at the hands of a terrorist on U.S. soil.
Yep.
That is the new definition of national security. And once you accept a zero-fail mission, no American dies from terrorists on U.S. soil, that's going to be tyranny at some point. We can look at the zero COVID stuff they did in China.
But we know that that's not really their mission, because if it was, we would have secured borders and we would be trying to identify who all these people are coming into our country illegally when we're basically at war with Russia right now. And it just blows my mind that they just let these people walk across. They're not being checked. They throw their passports and rip them up across the other side. Immediately they get free everything at your expense. So I don't think that the FBI mission is zero terrorism. I think that it's a pretext, like they're doing in the United Kingdom, to have a two-tier justice system where they target the locals and the natives who grew up there and try and accuse them of being bigoted and racist or whatnot for not allowing the government to replace them with peasants and uneducated people who are more easy to control, who are more easy to suppress because they already come from countries like Venezuela where they don't have any civil rights. So just to get a free check and a free phone is enough for them to vote for your political party that brought you here for life. And that's what is really going on in my estimation.
Where they're welding people into their homes. Once you start saying that nobody can die from terrorism, you have to go through and you've justified all of the overreach that may happen on the federal government spectrum. And so how did that creep happen? I think is also worth discussing. It starts off like this. If no American can die from terrorism, we need to keep an eye on the terrorists. That seems pretty reasonable. We don't really have a problem with that. So you're going to look for where are the foreign terrorists? Where is Al-Qaeda? Eventually, where is ISIS? Where's Al-Shabaab? Where are these people?
Well, that's easy. Just go to Minnesota. You could start with Ilhan Omar. That's where they are.
Where are these entities working? I mean, where are the FARC, right? In Latin America. Where are these groups working? And how do we keep them out of the United States? And how do we investigate them when they come here? That seems okay. We're kind of okay with that idea, I think. But you very quickly run out of international terrorists because one, there's not that many of them. And two, once you found them, they're not going to come here in the same way. And so they ran out of what we would call the International Terrorism Mission. The FBI calls it ITOS, the International Terrorist Operations Section. They ran out of a mission in a big way. It's a very small chunk, but they had this huge funding mandate from Congress because everybody wanted to be on the right team.
Okay, so you hear this? So we've got this agency, there's less Muslim terror going on. We have this new woke, false religion of wokeism, which is based on communism and Marxism. It's like a Luciferian religion. It's totally faith-based. You have to believe that somehow skin color it changes the dynamics of who a person is into being an oppressor or oppressed, right? You got to buy into all that stuff. And so they have this huge budget flush with cash. They have these religious zealots that like to cross-dress. And who do they want to target? Well, naturally, the Christians and the white males, because this is a group of people who are transhumanists. They would love more than anything to replace the nuclear model with the state. That was the goal of the communist Chinese as well. It's always the goal of totalitarians. Especially with the women, you want to immediately get single women on welfare and make the government their husband. And that has always been their goal. And that is what they've been doing for a long time now. In fact, in order to collect welfare, the birth father isn't even allowed to live in the home. Think about that.
Team stopping terrorism. And when they went on to the next thing, they said, well, where else can we find terrorism? We can find them in first generation or recently naturalized American citizens who live in the United States, but they ascribe to a foreign ideology. Now, this is going to be really common to people. It's called homegrown violent extremists. Not everybody has a good definition of it, but that's what it is. You're born in the United States or you're a naturalized citizen, but you ascribe to those ideologies. You're an Al-Qaeda guy.
That's what they're doing over in the UK. They basically, all these sub-Saharan Africans have come up into the United Kingdom and brought a jihadist style religion with them. And their kids are all radicalized. They have between 5 and 6 kids. They don't work. They collect government assistance. And we're seeing now that they've got the numbers that they needed, that it's erupting into a jihadist, basically revolution in the UK. You've got gangs of Muslim youth running around with machetes, chopping up anybody who looks like they have white skin, based on several stories and reports that I've gotten from friends in Ireland as well as from London.
Allegiance to it, even though you're a first generation Somali born in, you're born in Minneapolis, let's say. So maybe you pick on that thing. So now you've got this group of people called HVEs, and we're going to watch them, and we do all the surveillance on them, and we do the investigations on them, and we try to stop them from doing terrorism too. Okay, fair game. But once you start looking into your own house for terrorists, and you run out of the international terrorists, and you run out of the HVEs, you're going to keep trying to figure out how to use that funding, because government agencies don't exist to get smaller. They're not interested in efficiency. They're interested in growing their empires and making sure they have more employees and getting a bigger budget. That's just how it works. So they started looking for a thing they called DVEs. We went from HVE to DVE. The DVE is a domestic violent extremist. And that is anybody, in the first cases, it was like people that were, putting spikes into logging trees, and they were going out and doing like radical, fights against, whaling.
In other words, Antifa meet the definition of a domestic violent extremist, but Joe Biden said they're not really anything. They're just a bunch of kids having a good time. Leave them alone. But if you belong to the Proud Boys, which is a black-run patriot organization of veterans, you're a domestic violent white supremacist. Remember, a black guy, black-run organization but since they're patriots and they support the Constitution and they protected people from Antifa who were trying to kill them and beat them, the Proud Boys would come and act as a counter movement to fight back against Antifa. They're called domestic violent extremists and white supremacists, even though we know the head of and many of the members of the Proud Boys are military veterans and they're black. So that's just how ridiculous this has become, guys, with these woke administrative agents. Here we go.
Or something like that. They were also people that were white supremacists, that were Klansmen, that were looking to, firebomb a synagogue or something. So some of those things you can kind of justify, but as you try to spin up the threat and as you have more and more money that is tied up in terrorism that's not going to the places that it ought to go, you start looking for and making up this threat. And I believe this is my personal experience. And I had 20 plus what we would call like deployments. They were 2 weeks at a time, hitting high priority FBI terrorism cases that basically, and I've said this multiple times now, that the demand for white supremacy is outstripping the supply of white supremacy.
That's
so we have
right.
to manufacture it. And the FBI has gone into this sort of game.
And you see that with like Don Lemon and all these woke newscasters who might as well just admit that they're the propaganda agency of the Democrat Party. They're just really pushing hard, that everything's based on white this, white that. It's systemic white this. If you believe in merit, you're a racist. If you think people should have to score well on tests, you're a racist. But the real reason is they just want to dumb down society. They want a stupid populace like that movie Idiocracy. Give me a bunch of ones if you know what I'm talking about. So Chase, woke is sort of a term that encompasses the new generation of kids starting after Obama, basically. And it's just that they believe that all white males are basically racist and evil, and that the entire country is racist, and everything that's ever happened that bad to them is because of racism, and that white males in particular are the enemy, and that wealth should be redistributed to minorities in order for these evil white people to make up for the sins of their ancestors past. Exactly the opposite of what Martin Luther King Jr. taught. So just to give you like a rough breakdown, you can Google it too. There's all kinds of different definitions, but that's sort of the accepted definition. Try going onto a college campus. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
Where they have a playbook. They started doing it on Muslims in the early 2000s. They've done it on HVEs who are predominantly Muslim as well. And they're now doing it on people that are fitting the conservative bill, but they're just doing the same thing over and over again. And I always tell people, this is a great, like, sort of free tip for your audience. If you ever meet somebody, generally online, who agrees with all of your worst ideas, especially the ones that might be violent, even if they're just sort of said in hyperbole, and then they're not only willing to agree with you, but they also want to help you enact them, and they want to do it for the exact amount of money you happen to have, that's a Fed. That's not your friend. They're going to try to help you get into a terrorism plot. And that's a good way to find yourself in federal prison, probably for 20 to life. And this is exactly the playbook. Wow. What's sad is it's been written long form by a guy named Trevor Aronson, who's an author.
Hey, Brett, thanks for joining me. By the way, guys, Brett, everybody, I'll get Brett a wrench. Remind me to give Brett a wrench. She's or him or her, whoever Brett is, man. I really appreciate Brett. And yeah, Chase Johnson. I hope that was a good enough definition for you. Let's keep on watching this guy.
And he's no right winger. I mean, he works for The Intercept, but he's a good reporter, and he's written an excellent book that was considered mandatory reading for my surveillance team when I was working counterterrorism. The book is called The Terror Factory, and it's essentially, he's got a 15-minute TED Talk, so people can save themselves the book if they don't want to buy it, but it's worth a read. They can also just listen to it, and he essentially lays out that plan. They find people that are low IQ or down on their luck, financially in bad situations, that have some rough ideas. They encourage the worst ideas. They introduce undercovers. They introduce feds that are, conscripted, whether they're like CHS, the confidential human informant side, or the actual credentialed federal agent. And then they talk them into doing something terroristic. It's literally the meme of the FBI agent wearing the hat, poking the Pepe the Frog, saying, do a terrorism.
Hey, look, I think it is entrapment. I don't know what the deal is. I'm talking to people in the sidebar. I don't know what the deal is. I think it is entrapment. I just think that all these agencies are just out of control, and they're all politically driven, far, far left. And their mission is to destroy the nuclear family. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree.
That's what we do.
They're creating.
And so they goad them into that. They're creating it, correct? Because that has to meet that supply. And so when you create terrorism, you're basically ensuring that your budget's going to be good. So where's the white supremacy coming from? There's a great meme, and I'm a big fan of memes because I think they say so much with so little. But there's a guy wearing an FBI raid jacket. He's got his firearm drawn, and he's pointing down at a building. And it says, when the FBI finally realizes where all the terrorism is coming from, and he's pointing up, and the building is the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And that's what it is. It's coming out of the counterterrorism division out to the field. And then people are doing these investigations. Basically, it's the self-licking ice cream cone, if you're familiar with that sort of metaphor. Why does the ice cream cone exist? Because there needs to be ice cream and there's a tongue, and they both sort of feed off each other.
I mean, it's like what happened in Michigan, right? I mean, this is literally what happened in Michigan. When you have a number of, was it 12 individuals and 10 of them were feds going after the governor? I mean, this is literally right out of that playbook. We love to manufacture this in order to keep it going and to light this fire. It's amazing. When you were at the FBI and you were running counterterrorism and you were in these surveillance ops and you were doing these things, when did you realize, whoa, this is a moment when I need to step back from this? And the moment that you decided to blow the whistle and you saw what the FBI was doing, what was that moment where you crossed the Rubicon?
So for most people, I think this kind of thing is always a gradual step. I didn't start doing one thing. I got into the FBI in 2016, and my first week at the FBI Academy, they call it the 1 week where they introduce you to being a federal employee. I immediately found out that the FBI was not what I thought it was going to be. It's not Criminal Minds, and it's not super elite, and it's not like the show Quantico where it's the hardest grad school and the toughest boot camp and all this stuff. It's actually really a gentleman's course. And maybe that wasn't always the case, but it was certainly easy when I was there. I had a background coming out of the military, and I thought it was going to be tough. I expected to get punched in the face on the first day. That didn't happen. I was sort of let down as we went through it. And so I kind of went into the FBI doing the 5 months of training at Quantico thinking, when is this going to get serious? When are we going to be doing serious things with serious people? And it didn't happen at the academy. That's just not the nature of the way it works. When I got assigned to the Washington field office, this was in late 2016 and going into 2017, I immediately found that I had a terrible supervisor who did an awful job. She was breaking federal employment law.
Oh yeah, that's so normal. Like especially like the FBI, they really do think that they're above the law. Like even their agents. Look, if you say something to an FBI agent that's false and you thought it was true, for example, you can get thrown in jail for 2 years just for talking to them. They have an enormous amount of power. I'm telling you guys right now, if you ever get questioned by a federal officer or federal agent, you immediately tell them you want to talk to a lawyer. Always assume whenever law enforcement, whether it's state or federal, are talking to you, that you're being investigated. They're trying to find information so they can put you in torture cuffs, put you in their car and cart you off to the dungeon and take away your money. That is how they get promoted. That is how they grow the administrative state. There are people like you and I who are entrepreneurs, self-made people who generate wealth, and then the government agents come and fleece that from you and use that to secure their own positions of power. And this is exactly what our founding fathers warned against. And that's why I believe that we should abolish many of these administrative agencies and at the very least have absolute civilian oversight of these agencies and civilian oversight that cannot be compromised. And that's the problem when you have like these non-governmental agencies that get tax funding and then donate money to one side or the other. It's just evil. It's just enabling large corporations to destroy families. Now, one of my commenters, I think it was What's the Matter You, was talking about maybe the nuclear family is not so good. Maybe it's better to have all the families living together like we used to. And, look, I'm all for that. I mean, if my wife didn't have to work, right, because of the taxes that we're forced to pay and the marriage penalty and all that, I think it would be great for me to be able to afford to have a compound and have the whole family stay with me, and have her be there to handle everything. I think that would be the dream. But unfortunately, things have changed so much now, you can barely make it unless everybody's working and the kids don't have anyone at home and they're being raised by the blue hair mafia. And that's what they want, guys. So it's going to be a real big sacrifice. And I think that we can change a lot of things by developing parallel systems. Keep telling you guys that. Everybody in the sidebar here should be working together, doing business with each other, in forming parallel systems where we buy from each other and we wean ourselves from Target and all their satanic garbage and all their rainbow this and all that crap they're trying to force on children. And we just only do business with people that we like and trust. And we stay away from all these large corporations. I mean, look at Musk. I mean, he's done a pretty good job at exposing the corruption, and he's got money. That's part of a parallel system. You know, X and Twitter may not be the best, but it's probably better than YouTube, which is run by the very same people who hate people like us. So like I always say, we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel, because I'm being serious. Here we go.
And some other things that just made no sense. So I started by reporting the small infractions that I saw. I also saw there's a big concept that people are talking about now as it faces renewal called FISA 702. It's a specific subset of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And I was assigned to basically read FISA, particularly 702 FISA, for like 10 hours a day. Here's the catch. It was in Chinese. And I don't read or speak or write Chinese. I have no familiarity with that language whatsoever. They took me out of the military, where I had a background as a airborne qualified, dive capable air traffic controller with a licensed paramedic skill set. And so I come from this sort of interesting, weird, like amorphous, hybrid special operations background, where I'm trained to go in and do rescues. It's a very direct action type mission. And they go, what'd be good for you? You're kind of an outdoor dog. You've slept on the ground. Like, you've been to SEER school and done like interrogation stuff. What if we put you in an office where you sat for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, and just looked at Chinese FISA that you couldn't understand?
Oh, and I got to tell you, just from the stories I've heard from my friends who are leaving the agencies, like all of the agencies, the administrative bureaucrats that especially Biden has put in, they hate veterans. They hate anyone who's been in the military. They absolutely loathe anyone who served in the military. They hate them with a passion. And so I could see why he got thrown in this job trying to learn Chinese FISA regulations.
Yeah. And I thought, well, that's a really good way to get me to talk. Like, you'll definitely break me that way.
Right.
So here I am sitting and looking at this, and you'd assume like, okay, well, you're assigned to that. You don't speak the language, whatever. At least there's a linguist there, right? And we didn't have a linguist. We had no linguist assigned to my squad. And the fun thing is they gave us a linguist eventually. She was an intel analyst who was a native speaker, which was great. And then I found out that she didn't read Chinese. She could only speak it. And everything I had was in writing. It was like looking at people's email addresses. So utterly useful. And the only thing that we did with that FISA, which was really scary to me, and this is one of the first kind of disclosures that I started making as I was calling out the problems I saw, was that we were doing what's called reverse targeting. Mm-hmm. Reverse targeting is specifically illegal under the FISA. You're not allowed to get a FISA on one person and use it to find somebody else. Let's say you had a foreign contact who happened to work for an intelligence agency, but you didn't know that. The FBI might get that FISA, the 702 coverage. They're a non-US based person working for a foreign intel service. We could get a 702 FISA. I could write it up in the morning. And we would have that. We would start collecting using the NSA databases, and we'd find out what that person was doing. But if I was finding that person specifically looking for Americans that foreign intel person was contacting, then I would be targeting the Americans. That's called reverse targeting. Yeah. And that's illegal. But it's one of the only ways that 702 FISA is most useful. Because if you're a criminal investigator and you're looking for criminal acts and you're trying to find people that are, damaging United States security, you don't really care what foreign spies are doing to foreign people. You care what they're doing with US people and how those people might be compromising the United States national security mission. So you're only going to use that tool illegally. I use it as kind of an example. Imagine if you're a TSA officer, since we brought him up earlier, and you're sending people through a metal detector, and your job is keeping guns off aircraft. And then you're told your job depends on you keeping the gun off the aircraft, but you're not allowed to use the metal detector. By the way, everyone has to go through the metal detector, but don't use that to find guns. You have to find it another way. You're going to find guns with the metal detector because that's what the tool does. Right. And that's the way 702 FISA basically works. So I started having a problem with that right away. I also didn't understand the mission set because we weren't looking for criminal acts.
Most so you were using it to target Americans by going around to use national security tools, essentially tools that are
there. So just in a nutshell, they're illegally using public-private partnerships with big tech, in particular, banks, to go through all your financial data to circumvent getting a warrant under the Fourth Amendment. And so this was done under the guise of protecting the homeland from Muslim terrorists. And remember that our government allowed those people into our country. Don't forget that they allowed those Islamic terrorists to come into our country, just like they're allowing like millions and millions of illegal aliens from third world countries, from probably Russia, communist China, our enemies, just to flood right in. What do you guys think is going to happen when one of these terror cells that Joe Biden allowed into our country decides to activate? Well, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to pass another law to protect you, right? To protect you after they created the problem, right? After they created the problem, they'll pass a law to protect you from the problem they created. And that law will ultimately be like a FISA, where it circumvents the Fourth Amendment. And this is why the administrative state is the enemy of the people of the United States, because they'll do anything they can to circumvent your unalienable rights under natural law, which John Locke bestowed upon our founding fathers, and our founding fathers bestowed upon us, that your rights come from an all-powerful creator from the universe, and they cannot be taken away or diminished by the government. And this is precisely what the administrative state does not like. They do not love or like that. The administrative state likes guys like this. The administrative state likes guys like Klaus Schwab, because he'll donate tons of money to their politician, right? To their big government politician. And then their big government politician will make sure to promote that agent and get them up the walk, right? Make sure, give them a cabinet level position, right? And then they can start giving them insider tips so they can do their stock trades. So people like a Pelosi goes into office with a few thousand in the bank and leaves a billionaire, for example. So that's how it really works. I just want you guys to know what really is going on out there. And well, let's you know what I'm going to do, guys? I'm going to pause this video at 21 minutes, and I'm going to give you the link as well, because I think it's worth a watch. Because I don't want to bore you too much, but I just wanted to put it out there about what's going on with the administrative state and the targeting of regular, everyday Joe Americans. And now you understand the partisan political nature, especially of the FBI. It went from sort of an almost like a racist organization under Hoover, and did a complete judo flip. And now it's right back to being racist, but racist against Black people, and or hateful against families, especially straight people. So it's just kind of flipped. Like, unless you're LGBT or a trans or woke, you're not going to fit in at the FBI anymore. And so guys like the guy we just saw, Kyle, they're on their way out. And I don't see those agencies recovering any of their traditional American values. They're too far gone. It's just, I don't see it happening. And the problem with Marxism is they always want to delete our Bill of Rights and constitutional protections. Take the First Amendment, the censorship. They want to say that anything they disagree with is hate speech, so they can silence you. And they've already done that in the United Kingdom. They have crimes of insult in Germany. They'll throw you in jail in the United Kingdom just for talking about not wanting to have rapists coming in from sub-Saharan Africa. If you speak out against that, they'll arrest you for the crime of insult, basically. It's insane what's going on. Hey, thanks, Brett. I appreciate that. Brett just gifted some memberships. Believe it or not, guys, even though I am a relatively successful lawyer, I would love to spend more time doing this. If I could find a way to get some funding and donations more, I would be all about doing this as a full-time job, honestly. I mean, all I need is a couple of big injury cases, a big truck or motorcycle accident, and that would be enough to fund me just to be doing my channel all day long. But in the meantime, I appreciate everybody coming here and supporting me, especially in Restore Our Rights. That Restore Our Rights reminds me of a Marine friend that I have who left the country several years ago because he wanted to have freedom. And since America is so low on the freedom index now, people are actually having to leave to feel that sense of freedom that they once had by being an American. Kind of sad. That's right, Robert Coleman. They're precisely trying to take away our freedom of speech, and they're doing it in a disgusting and sick way. For example, the Safety Act in California, Newsom signed this law that, these woke public school teachers now have the right to keep secrets from parents about their kids' gender. So if one of these freshly graduated UCLA Marxist teachers with rainbow flags all over her desk decides that your son is now a girl, the whole class now calls your son a she, her, and they'll even provide a dress for him to wear at school and then keep it a secret from the parents so they don't know about it. And so it's called the Safety Act. And I represent several parents. One person who was convinced by her doctor to cut off her boobs. Of course, the doctors make an enormous amount of money, and they're trying to make it to where the state pays for everything. That's why the medical industrial complex is pushing all these trans surgeries. They're going to make billions. I mean, the hormones alone, you make about $1 million per patient. Think about that off of Obamacare. So it's like this big power grab, right? So that's another example where they're using the law to say it's hateful and violent to tell the parents about the transitioning by the school teachers, the grooming by the school teachers of these children. That's hateful. And since it's hateful, it's not protected speech. And it's a violent act. It's an act of violence because you're preventing your little kindergartner from coming out of the closet. And that's clearly a human rights violation, according to Gavin Newsom and his friends in San Francisco, right? Or Epstein Island, if you prefer. So basically, you're right. The speech laws have been turned on their head as well. And what you have is the American, the far left in America is modeling itself after the Europeans. They want to have a system like they have in Germany or England, where everybody's monitored and followed around with cameras. You can't say anything critical of anything the government does because that's considered violent. You go to jail for that. And obviously they don't want critical thinkers, because critical thinkers see that and they've read the book, the Orwell 1984 book, and they can see, oh my God, these are people who are thought police. This is like Logan's Run. This is exactly like all these guys warned us about, and it's happening right now in real time. So you have to be like a real dumb idiot, like stupid person, to not understand it. So naturally they want to flood the country with people from third world countries with zero critical thinking skills who would just be happy with a check. And they want the younger generation to be completely brainwashed into this whole woke thing on the college campuses. So they'll go along with it. But ultimately their rights are being disintegrated. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that. Now, yeah, and everybody hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks, Ed Evans. And I really do appreciate that I have such a loyal audience. And I know tonight wasn't my typical cop watcher kind of show where I talk about, cops planting drugs on people. But nonetheless, it's a really important show because it'll help you understand, why is it that I'm being, my kids are being secondaried all the time at the airport? Well, now you know why. Because the FBI is targeting especially white males, Christians, and anybody who's considered buying a firearm or a Bible. They're automatically being targeted as potential domestic violent extremists. And if you want to learn more, let me see if I have my video. So I did a video a while back. I'm going to put it in the sidebar. Take a look at this one, guys, if you can click on it. This is, in fact, I think I've got it up on the screen. So this video right here, it's called Sue the FBI for Illegal Data Mining of Christians, gun owners, and supporters of legal immigration. Can you sue the FBI for doing that? And I exposed the program, and I even have I kind of made fun of Klaus Schwab, a great, powerful Leviathan that can control every aspect of your life. And now we see that the fears of many civil libertarians may be becoming true. So the Domestic Security Alliance Council, which is basically a private company that's also the government, I mean, I don't know any other way to describe it, tries to apparently help the federal government find loopholes around the Fourth Amendment so they can gather data about you without getting a warrant. Apparently, these people that work for the FBI, a lot of them, department heads and other government enforcement agencies like DHS, likes the idea of keeping their jobs. So you have to create a crisis, you have to create a problem in order to justify your inflated salary and to get a promotion, maybe become a politician or get a revolving door job at Google or Facebook or Instagram, which seems to be the order of the day. Then they'll scoot you over into a job with big tech afterwards, or you get a job at CNN. At least that's what a lot of people are telling me. And so now what we're seeing is, if you shopped at Cabela's, if you shopped at Bass Pro Shop, if you support legal immigration, if you believe in the concept of the Bill of Rights, of the Second Amendment, that all men were created equal and have certain unalienable rights, and one of them is the right of self-defense, based upon the definitions of what a bearable arm would be at the time of the founding of the Constitution, that makes you a domestic extremist, possibly a terrorist. It almost sounds exactly like the ADL or the Southern Poverty Law Center, other organizations that rely sometimes on tax grants and things like that to survive. It's sort of like starting a nonprofit to end cancer, but the only way you can make money is to not end cancer. And that's what a lot of people are complaining about as well, is that can you take these organizations seriously when their whole existence is based upon creating something to treat the symptom instead of the cure?
That's right.
So now what we have is civil libertarians for years have been arguing that for-profit media and the feds have been working with China, Canada, and far-left groups like the ADL to usher in a digital currency and a DEI scoring system. In other words, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You have to hire people not based on their qualifications, not based upon their merit, because that's racist, but based upon their skin color to undo, to prove that you're an anti-racist. It's not enough to not be a racist. Now you have to be an anti-racist. And well, that means whatever BlackRock says it is. And they have so much control over political campaigns, these large corporations, over political campaigns and funding, that I'm shocked that this report even came out, to be honest. But basically, you have the great Leviathan. Again, this is a battle between natural law and the Leviathan, as usual, saying that if you're a free thinker, we don't want you around. It's sort of like these basketball players, they make big money, but now China's gotten involved in our basketball leagues. So if you say anything bad about China or the way they treat people, there's a high probability that you could be arrested when you land there. You definitely can't play basketball there. They don't like it. So there is no free speech. You have the same thing going on in Germany and other European countries. Britain, if you say anything bad about the unfettered illegal immigration from Islamic countries where they don't support the British system and way of life, if you say anything bad about those people, then you're considered to be a domestic terrorist yourself and put on a watch list and maybe even put in prison. That's how bad it is. There is no free speech. And so we see these large corporations trying to normalize that in the United States. If you say something they don't like, they'll try to call it hate speech. They'll try to force you to say other people's pronouns to control what you can and can't say. Now, they've grown so bold that their leaders like Klaus Schwab, who want to basically control the world, at least that's what many people say, are saying that we may not even need elections and we may be able to control everything with AI possibly. Of course, for-profit media and the fact checkers immediately started rolling this stuff back, saying we didn't really say that he supported the concept of elections being done with AI. But I mean, why wouldn't he, when all of his people, like people at Google, people at Meta, are the ones programming the AI? Anyways, here's the video. Check it out.
You do not even have to have elections anymore because you can already predict.
You kind of get the idea. That's Sergey Brin from Google. These are the same people who helped communist China create their public system of controls and social controls, where if you say something bad about the government, you'll be denied your right to travel. You could be denied your ability to take money out of your bank account. And of course, a lot of civil libertarians go, hey, that sounds just like Justin Trudeau. Well, no, duh, because they're all working with the same people. Look, China has been donating tons of money to Western politicians directly and indirectly. They've been doing it since General Charlie Tree under the Clintons in the United States, where they were able to exert enormous amounts of control. China does not want to loan the United States money if we don't restrict our free speech and gun laws. The ultimate idea here is these guys don't like the concept of freedom, and they don't want those same ideas of freedom being passed on to their citizens. Look what happened to France. Look what happened to France. The King of France supports the United States. Concept of individual rights and freedom get passed on to the French, and they end up beheading their king. Well, China doesn't want that. The original idea was with Richard Nixon was that he was hoping by normalizing relations, they would become more like us. Well, actually, what ended up happening is they looked at all the holes in our system because it relied on Christian principles of honesty, decency, and they figured out ways to exploit it. And now they're in the driver's seat, and they are moving heavily along with these big companies to exercise global control. And so here's another example of this. WEF young leaders like Trudeau and Newsom are leading the way. And we saw that with the Canadian truckers. They protested. And of course, Trudeau said they had wrong ideas. It just sounded like something right out of like the Bolshevik revolution. Wrong ideas. Goes ahead and uses this new digital system, which big tech helped create, to shut down people's bank accounts, to restrict them from buying things. Sound familiar? Just like communist China. But what happened? Well, there's still a few conservative justices and judges in Canada who support the concept of individual freedoms that are being stomped out by the Trudeau government. And they ruled that the use of the Emergencies Act to end a truck convoy and to destroy these people was an unjustified infringement of their civil rights. I mean, come on. Can you imagine your president saying you have wrong ideas because you're on the other side of the spectrum that believes in the traditional values of freedom and dignity? So that's what people are facing in Canada. And now we see the same thing happening in the United States with the CIA begging Congress to please allow us to keep spying on our own citizens. And then we see how China planted an FBI mole who was only discovered after they gutted the CIA's spy network. So you see what's going on. It's just crazy stuff, right? And then you see these non-governmental organizations where these government employees are going back and forth from pharma, big tech, from the FBI, CIA, back and forth to big tech. And they're getting, big tech's like basically able to skirt Section 230 and pretty much do whatever they want. And they're supporting one of the political parties, so they're getting political cover. And the people they're targeting are apparently white males, religious people, and people who support the Constitution. So what's the database that the FBI used? Well, several. I mean, they've misused the NSA databases, but now there's these other databases, the DSAC database. This is this private public corporation that the FBI and the Biden administration are moving full steam ahead to spy on you. Okay, so now we see there was a 2023 Wired article. This is kind of old news, right? But basically, the government is trying to use these public-private partnerships to buy their way out of constitutional protections over we the people. And that's it. I mean, that's the bottom line, is the administrative state. They look at, so these bureaucrats, like these woke academics, basically communists, they look at countries like China and they go, my God, why can't we be like them? Look at how much power their administrators have. They run everything, and they're so jealous of wealth creators, like guys like me who get up at like 4 a.m. and work construction, I was a contractor at a limousine company. I ended up being Rodney Dangerfield's private limousine driver. The administrators, bureaucrats don't like people like us. We're the guys who always got the girl. Bottom line, they do not like entrepreneurs. They do not like successful people. They look at people who are successful in a jealous fashion. It's almost uncanny, the administrative state. So typically it's the unattractive people, they usually who get into positions of power in these agencies, and they are totalitarians. And it's like revenge for all the people, like for the quarterback who bullied them in junior high school, for example. And so that is what you have with the administrative state. They look at Marxist totalitarian countries like China and they go, man, I want that model. Their police in particular, man, this Fourth Amendment sucks. This Fifth Amendment, this sucks. All these rights, these suck. I'm with the state. I don't give a shit anymore about the Constitution because I'm running shit. And so a lot of people, they get that. And that's why I always tell you guys, if you're going to be voting or putting someone in power, you need to make sure that that person knows the law and means to keep it well. And I recommend that you read books by philosophers like Thomas Aquinas, that you read Blackstone's commentaries on the English law, that you look at Adam Smith, you read Wealth of Nations, you learn about laissez-faire capitalism, because we don't have real capitalism in this country anymore. We have sort of like a fascist sort of crony capitalism where like communist China will bring in suitcases full of cash for the Clintons. The Clintons will use that cash, to pay off some of their friends, maybe a general in the military. And ultimately, communist China ended up taking over Seal Beach Naval Weapons Station. Remember, we had a beautiful military base there in Long Beach. Interesting, right? They can actually pull in Chinese warships into Seal Beach Naval Weapons Station now. Just think about that. How if you can just find some corruptible people who don't love their country, which we have a lot of them in the public school systems now, being brainwashed by their teachers who also hate their country. Imagine the next generation of politicians, guys. We will have zero freedom unless we take back the country now in a way where we teach natural law, we teach about the Bill of Rights, we talk about homesteading and homeschooling. You've got to get your kids off the Rockefeller created public school system as soon as possible. That would be the number one way to disinfect the brains of your children from this woke nonsense that's destroying the minds and bodies of so many innocent children. So anyways, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And everybody, I want you to recognize and stand tall for Restore Our Rights Now. This is my buddy. He's a former U.S. Marine combat vet, and I got a lot of love for him. And I want you guys all just to give him a big hoorah. Give me a bunch of ones for my Marine friend. And we're going to go ahead and close it down in a second here. So guys, just so you know, and I think I owe someone a book, but this, if you want to learn a little bit about me, you can buy my digital ebook, My Journey to Becoming a Practicing Lawyer with No Law Degree or Undergrad. And this is obviously not the book that I'm selling online right now, because we just don't have the money to put all these books to press, but I have a digital ebook. If you go to my YouTube channel and you look at the homepage there's a PayPal link. I'll send you a copy of the ebook. Buy a couple of them, just to support my channel. I know not everybody wants to do a super chat for me or buy me a cup of coffee. And I prefer you buy a copy of my book because you can learn something. And also, I'm not giving half my money to these globalists who support the World Economic Forum, right? Like the same people. Every time you pay me, you're paying them. We don't want that. So if you guys want to support my channel, this is a really great way to do it. And I have my son and daughter helping me do this, because I'm trying to teach them how to become better entrepreneurs and how to run a business so they don't have to get a job working, for Starbucks or whatever, or Target when they're older. And no, I don't know if they're going to be lawyers. I don't push my kids into anything other than I want them to pursue what they love, but to provide an example that, yes, you could definitely take over the firm. You might as well get a law degree. Even if you don't want to practice law, it's good to have a law degree. It's good to be able to be a lawyer. You get a lot more respect, and people take advantage of you now unless you're a lawyer. That's the main reason why I had to become a lawyer, because, man, if you're not a lawyer, people just take hardcore advantage of you. Once they know you're a lawyer, at least they'll try to treat you a little bit better. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. But I do donate an enormous amount of my time to try to provide information and knowledge to my friends here on YouTube. And I do really appreciate you guys supporting the channel and all that good stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and close it down for the night. And let me see. So I've got a question here. So Joe is asking me if I would take a Title 42 case. Well, I've taken many civil rights cases, and between Alan Beck and I, even if we can't take your case, we could at least try to lead you in the right direction. Most of the cases that I take are like like motorcycle accidents, bus accidents. I'm heavily invested in the military veteran and the motorcycle community. And as you guys probably know, most of the infantry Marines are riding motorcycles because, if we're even like 2 seconds late, we're going to the brig. So we always have to be ready for react, for drills, and to show up on time. And motorcycles are easier to store when you get deployed. So that's how I made most of my money, is motorcycle accidents, Marines getting run over by trucks and cars. In fact, I think that's how I met my friend here, Restore Our Rights. I think I represented him in a motorcycle accident, if I'm not mistaken. That's just typically Marines will do a Google search because they want to have a Marine represent them. We're just kind of weird like that. We have our own sort of closed community when it comes to doing business. We don't really trust you unless you served in my beloved Corps. So that's kind of the way that works. But as far as civil rights cases, the civil rights cases that I normally handle are going to be like a tight handcuff case where you had to get your hand or your fingers amputated, or serious nerve damage, as well as the police shooting cases. We've done a couple of wrongful death by police shooting cases that are pretty horrible. And, assault and battery. We did a rape case involving an officer, where they handcuffed somebody and took advantage while she was under the influence. So yeah, really egregious type stuff. But if it's not a serious and catastrophic injury, typically we do not handle those because I'm just not geared for it. I don't have enough staff and team to handle a bunch of smaller cases. But I do have a really strong network of solid lawyers all throughout all the different states of the union. And I can definitely try to help you. And also, I can help answer questions. If, like, for example, if one of you guys is having an issue, reach out to me privately and I'll try to do a video about it. Like I'll do a video breakdown to help you. I did a couple on the Carolina and Fort Worth case. But I'm a little more dynamic than most of the other cop watchers. I don't just do videos about cops beating people up or auditors. I'm a natural law guy, and I believe in government accountability operations, whatever they might be, whether it be cop watching, whether it be holding the FBI accountable, whether it be holding the Postmaster General accountable for delivering all these fake ballots, right? Like how is this being allowed to happen? That you can just pull up with a big rig truck filled with a bunch of ballots that all signed with the same signatures, unsecure, and get away with that. It's just, that kind of stuff. Government accountability. Like, why is it that when it's a felony to drop more than one voter registration into a voter drop box, that when people are caught on camera doing like 30 or 40 at a time, we know they're fake. Nothing happens to them and the police don't even investigate. Why isn't the FBI investigating that? Well, we kind of know why, right? Because their boss probably doesn't want them investigating that, right? Okay, think about that. So if you want to restore accountability, you need to start thinking about government accountability and you need to start deleting laws. So I recommend that you develop parallel systems, that you only do business with people that you like and trust within your system. Stop shopping at these Luciferian corporatized stores, like a Target, and start doing business with people who are trustworthy and support traditional family American values, which is, why on earth are you giving money to people who have your destruction ingrained into their DNA? Think about that. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close it out, guys. I will do some other stuff. Reach out to me with ideas for the next show. And, if you want to go on a tour of Asia and meet a lot of gills, you like Tom Vu, and come to my seminar. My buddy, Restore Your Rights, he's a pilot. And so if you want to go to the Philippines or you want to, Bali or something like that, he can take you on some tours and introduce you to a lot of gills. So you can have a good time that way. But anyways, I'm going to hit it, guys. Remember to like and subscribe, and also always press that little save thing. That's really important. That shows the YouTube gods that you like my stuff. So like, subscribe, save, and then share with all your friends. Like anybody who's on the fence about being a patriot, anybody who actually trusts the administrative state, have them watch my stuff. Because, you know, I'm not anti-government. I'm anti-politician. I'm anti-bureaucracy. I'm all about having limited government and binding the bureaucracy with the chains of the Constitution. And that's why I have now millions of views on my channel, because other people feel the same way. And I'm grateful that you guys show up and support me. And that's why I try to do the shows as much as I do, even though it's hurting me financially to do this, because I'm not able to work when I should be working on files. So anything you can do to help me support the channel by, buying my book, doing a super chat, or buying me a coffee is really appreciated, because it keeps my wife off my butt. And she does not like it when I spend all this time here when I should be tutoring the kids or taking my son to judo class. Tonight I missed an orientation because I promised you guys that I would do the show. So just keep that in mind. Thank you guys. Thanks, Miss Taro. Thanks, Restore Our Rights Now. Good seeing you. Anti-criminal government. That's right. That's what I am. Anti-criminal government. And all about working, Miss Taro. But God bless you guys. God bless all of you. Semper Fidelis. I think we've got, hey, my birthday's tomorrow, so give me a bunch of ones for my birthday. And I don't know if I'm coming on tomorrow because it is going to be my birthday. I'll probably be a few sheets under the wind by this time tomorrow night. But either way, I really do appreciate all you guys. And it's so cool to know that there's at least, a couple 100,000 people on this planet that support my channel, that still believe in the America that me and my friend Restore Our Rights Now, served in the Marine Corps to protect and defend. So with that being said, Semper Fi, do or die, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace out.